Yes.
And I know it's so obvious, and I'm ashamed that it took me this long to realize it. But like, it came to me in a flash. Like, he is the reason why everything is happening the way that it happens in these stories. Like, him being in danger with his unit is the reason that Steve like gets off of the stage and like goes to
Mm-hmm.
actually do something in the first film. Like, he's the motivator for Steve to kind of go rogue and do what he does in Winter Soldier, and he's the reason
Yep.
why he is standing in opposition to everyone else in Civil War. Because if he was just some rando, there would be no conflict in Civil War. Steve would just be like, "Yeah, that's the guy. Let's go get him."
Right. Well, in context, that kind of makes sense. I think there's that comment late in Civil War, just as they're about to go into the Russian facility where Zemo is, and they make the offhand comment about, well, haven't we been best friends for about 100 years now,
Right,
or
right.
close to it?
Yeah.
So that being the narrative spine, that being the thread that kind of connects the plots for all three films, that makes sense.
Yeah. So then let's just move on to the thing that we really need to hit here, and that is Sharon's speech at Peggy's funeral.
Yes.
Oh
Yes.
my little goodness. That
Yeah.
just gets me every single time. And the cool thing that I love about that speech is actually condensed from a longer speech that Captain America himself gives to Spider-Man in
Yep.
in the Civil War comic.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire speech, he gives a lengthy quote from Mark Twain about
Yes, he does.
who is the Republic. You know, what actually defines the country. And you know, it's not the press, it's not the church, it's not the government, it's every individual person, and each individual has the responsibility to act according to their convictions. So that's basically sort of a summary of what the Mark Twain quote is. But here's the
Yep.
whole thing that Cap says. Doesn't matter what the press says. Doesn't matter what the politicians or the mob say. Doesn't matter if the whole country decides that something wrong is something right. This nation was founded on one principle above all else, the requirement that we all stand up for what we believe, no matter the odds or the consequences. When the mob and the press and the whole world tell you to move, your job is to plant yourself like a tree beside the river of truth and tell the whole world, no, you move.
Yeah. And I think that is something, that is an understanding that character has that is very important for today, for right now, in a lot of different contexts. I, of course, we've talked about it before. I, of course, come at it from a viewpoint of, living and working in Washington, D.C. for 13 years and having spent a good chunk of that working in politics at Capitol Hill. And that's one of the things where if folks had a solid understanding of what Cap says to Spider-Man there and what Ben Parker said to Spider-Man way back in the beginning, in the very first, Spider-Man story, and that with great power comes great responsibility, or maybe in more of a DC context, with great influence comes great responsibility.
Right.
If those two things were deeply understood and deeply held, I think our country would be a little bit different.
Yeah, that's true. So then the other thing that we need to just hit really quick about Civil War is a question that my friend Aaron Sturgill asked when I put out on Facebook that we were going to be recording about Civil War, and listeners, you'll meet Aaron Sturgill after we are finished with our MCU rewatch, because he's a really cool guy. He's got a lot of interesting perspectives. We're going to talk about H.P. Lovecraft, and we're going to talk about a bunch of different things with him as we move forward into the rest of the show. But he asked a question basically about the continuity of the MCU and how it's kind of starting to become really dense and self-referential, and how he experienced this when he went to see Civil War, having skipped Winter Soldier, especially, and also having skipped Age of Ultron. And thinking that he could just go into Civil War without having seen those, and you're missing a lot of important narrative pieces if you did skip those films before going into Civil War. So the question is kind of, I think the heart of his question is, how much do you have to, or should you just expect at this point that you have to do all of the homework, and you have to have seen all of the movies before you go into the next one? And is that fair to the casual consumer of the MCU?
I have a couple of different angles on this. Part of me says one does not simply walk into a Marvel movie, because of the fact that, yes, we're now at the 18th or 19th movie, and they build on one another. And so, part of me says, yes, you do the homework, but at the same time, I think it really depends on your audience and who you're dealing with directly. For example, I had a friend who, when Thor Ragnarok came out, really wanted to see it with those of us that were going, but I was also aware that there were a lot of pieces that she hadn't seen. So rather than tell her, start at the beginning and work your way through all of the movies up until then, essentially what myself and a group of friends decided to do was we sat down and we watched Thor and Thor the Dark World with her, and then had her watch things like Doctor Strange, the Avengers, and a couple of, Doctor Strange, in both Avengers movies. We had her watch a handful of movies on her own that we thought would be pertinent to the understanding she might need going into Thor Ragnarok, but we certainly, didn't give her the whole list and say, start with Iron Man from 10 years ago and work your way through.
Right.
We just picked what we thought would be most pertinent to what she needed and had her do that.
Yeah, I think that's valid. And so I guess the answer kind of shortly is that you kind of have to take them on a case-by-case basis. That it depends what you have seen, and it depends what you want to go see. Because if you wanted to just walk cold into Doctor Strange, that's fine.
Right.
If you wanted to go cold into Guardians 2, you even pretty much could.
Right.
But if you want to go cold into Civil War, that might not be the best advised move.
No, I would completely agree with that. I can only imagine, somebody who might try to go walk cold into Avengers Infinity War next month and just be totally and completely and utterly lost.
So here's a public service announcement from Two Geek Soup. Don't go into Infinity War having not watched any of the other Marvel movies.
Yeah. Please do not. You will be lost. You will be confused. And you're not going to be very happy.
And probably none of the listeners of this podcast are going to have that problem.
I would certainly hope not.
If you're here listening to us and you still haven't actually watched any of the Marvel movies, just please drop me a line. I'd really like to know what your deal is.
So would I. Like, that would be really, really interesting. Like, is it because you know the both of us and you just like hearing the two of us geek out about things that we like? Which, if that's you, that's wonderful. That's great. Props to you for supporting what we're doing.
Yeah,
but
I know my mom listens to the podcast, but I know that she also has seen at least a couple of the Marvel movies. So anyway,
right.
All right. So we're gonna start wrapping it up here. With it being a cup of soup, I don't have guaranteed good news today. But maybe by the time this comes out, I'll have scared something up just to chuck into the show notes. So take a look at those, and we're gonna wrap it up. Aaron, thanks for being with me here today and interacting with this stuff and sort of cleaning up some of those loose ends from a couple episodes ago.
Absolutely, man. Anytime. I love doing it.
Yep. All right. Well, again, thanks for listening. And all joking aside, we really, really love to hear from our listeners on anything that you'd like to talk to us about. The email address is 2geeksoup@gmail.com. On Facebook, we are on 2geeksoup. Instagram and Twitter are at 2geeksoup. Our music is provided by the Daniel Levi Band, and we're recorded at Soundline Studios with production support by Earnhardt. And even though it probably means that I'm the grubby janitor, this podcast is a proud member of the More Than One Lesson faculty.